Shalom, welcome to today's edition of Rabbi Ron in the House, Tree of Life Bible, digging into Acts chapter 2. Verse 5 tells us that Jewish people were staying in Jerusalem, devout men from every nation under heaven. Jewish men from all over the world were gathering together in Jerusalem at this particular time. Why were they all there? What were Jewish men from all over the world gathering together for in Jerusalem? Was Steve Jobs there unveiling the very first personal computer? Was Walt Disney there? Did he build a theme park in Jerusalem before moving here to Florida? No, not one of those. No one was there for entertainment or technology to simplify their lives, to enjoy their lives. They were there because it was Shavuot, one of the feasts of the Lord. And God said that on 3 of the feasts, all Jewish men needed to be in Jerusalem to worship at the temple. 3 times a year, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, which now we're celebrating right now, Sukkot. This one was Shavuot. And so on these 3 times, on these 3 feasts, Jewish men were required to come to Jerusalem to worship God, to meet with Him at the temple. Now listen, it was a great thing to do, but there was also a little bit of cost, a little bit of an effort made. Either what would have to happen is if you had a large family, you might have said, man, it's a little rough, a lot of little kids. Wife, stay home with the kids. I'll take off and travel with some of the other guys from town. And you'd have to pack your suitcase, leave your wife and kids behind for a little vacation, a little trip, but not just a fun vacation, to take off on a journey to go worship God, meet with Him. Or if your family was able, you had to pack up the whole family and clothes for everyone and hit the road with the whole crew. Then what would happen? You'd get to Jerusalem. Now where are you going to stay? You don't got a house there. First you check in with the relatives. But if you weren't the first ones to get into town, the place may have already been packed, filled like sardines. All the other relatives showing up from out of town. So if that was the case, then what did you have to do? You had to go to the local hotel. And listen, if the hotels were doing things like they do now, when the big traveling seasons happen, what do? They jack up the rates, double, triple the cost from the rest of the year. So there was a workload and an effort that had to be made to pick up and travel. There was an investment for traveling financially, for getting hotel rooms, things like that, eating out in restaurants. It all adds up. And so there was an effort involved. But folks, it was worth it. This wasn't just a trip to Disney World to have some fun. This was to go to the temple and to meet with God. And that alone is worth it. But then we saw in our last episode, even more so, what happened this time. God manifested His presence. He made His presence so obvious that it was beyond a shadow of doubt that God was real. He was present. He appeared as tongues as fire, as a mighty rushing wind, shook the place in which they were at. Folks, this was an encounter with God that nobody ever forgot. They remembered for the rest of their lives. And it says as well in the text that about 3,000 men were so impacted they surrendered and gave their lives to Messiah Yeshua that day, were eternally changed. And so this was an incredible opportunity, but there was effort, there was cost involved to go do it. I want to encourage you that God calls you to go on journeys. He calls on you to go and worship with Him, to meet with Him, and to serve Him and to build His kingdom. And at times there is effort and there is a cost involved. You might have to drive a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour to go do what it is. You might have a little effort, a little hands-on labor, a little work. You might have a little bit of walking and traveling. But let me tell you, if God is calling you to go, He wants to meet with you. And if you meet with God, it is worth it. It is worth any cost, any amount of effort. And so think of this story. The next time God calls you and says, I want you to go do this, and you think, man, that's a lot of work. I want you to think back here to this story in Acts chapter 2 and all the work that they had to go through to go to Jerusalem to worship God. But their lives were changed forever for doing it. And so when God calls you, remember that. Pack up your bags, do whatever effort you have to do. It is worth it to meet with a living God. It is worth it. And so I hope this encourages you and helps you to favorably respond, to follow the Lord and do whatever He calls you, irregardless of cost or effort. And so thanks so much for being with me today. This has been Rabbi Ron in the house.